Yes, I did. So I think I've had a lot of really good mentors throughout my career, but I think my first and maybe most important mentor is actually my mom. So my mom was a clinical microbiologist for a really long time. She's recently retired, but she always worked really hard to kind of get us interested in science, and so she had this like homemade microscope, and we would go out into the woods behind our house and look at pond water in the microscope, and she had all these like microbiology textbooks, and I would kind of steal them and read them just out of curiosity. And then I remember she used to take me into the lab if I was like had to stay home from school or I was sick, and so like the smell of like incubators and LB broth is actually really comforting to me, I think, because of that, which is kind of weird, but yeah, so I would say that like my mom is probably my most inspirational mentor that I have. I think, you know, my biggest achievement is definitely like having a lab at UVA. I think when I started graduate school, I never would have dreamed that I would end up here. And it's like one of my favorite places in the world, and have many wonderful colleagues. So that is probably my biggest accomplishment. My biggest failure is actually the first project I ever had in science. I was working as an undergraduate, like independent researcher in Bill Petrie's lab, and I was trying to create these small hairpin RNAs to knock down gene expression in the protozoan parasite Entamoeba histolytica. And I worked for 2 years on that project, first as an undergrad and then as a lab technician. And I went through, you know, cloning them and transfecting them into E. histolytica, and then checking the gene expression by QRT-PCR. And I remember when I got my QRT-PCR results back, and I found that I had actually overexpressed these virulence genes, and I was devastated at the time. And I remember going into Bill's office and just like crying and like feeling like a total failure. And he was just incredibly supportive, and so I think that still stands out to me as like working on something for 2 years and having it be a total disaster, but I learned a lot from that project, so I can't say that I regret it. I think one of my favorite things about being in science is that I don't really have like a typical day. Every day is different, and there's like new challenges and new exciting pieces of data, new papers coming out all the time, so it's always different. I do, you know, try to spend some time in the lab doing experiments and doing some bench work. I, you know, really enjoy reading and writing, working on grants, and kind of keeping up with the latest fascinating papers that are coming out. So yeah, every day is different, but I think, you know, it's always exciting. Yeah, so I think everybody struggles with that to some extent, no matter what career they're in. And so, you know, of course, it's like something that everyone works differently and has to kind of figure that out for themselves. So for me, I am not someone who can work 80 hours a week and still be kind of creative and passionate about science and really interested in what I'm doing. So I kind of have to be careful to, you know, be like efficient while I'm here and really focus on what I'm doing and get things done. And then I, you know, at the end of the day, I like to go home and just kind of forget about science and just recharge. And I know, like, I think one of the challenges of being in science is that we kind of have this sort of unconscious perception that if you're not thinking about science 24/7, if it's not the only thing that you care about in the world, that you're not a real scientist. And it's important for me that like other people know that you can succeed in science and still have work-life balance. And I have a lot of hobbies that are important to me and my family. I love spending time with them. So that's kind of my goal is to have both things, and to kind of just work hard to keep that balance, because I think it lets me do my best work and also still enjoy life. That's a great question. I think that for me, like the ultimate motivator in science is to discover something that helps people. I'm kind of equally interested in both basic and translational research because I love the idea of uncovering some like basic biological phenomenon and then being able to combine that with a therapy or a treatment that helps people is like the dream. Yeah, I think discovering something that ends up helping people is the biggest motivating factor for me in doing research. And so I don't know if that'll happen in 10 years or 20 or 30, but that is the eventual goal, and that's kind of why I'm here. I've been really lucky, I think, in my career that I haven't faced a lot of like overt discrimination. I mean, I think, as women in science, like there are some times where, people will make kind of offhand comments and you're kind of left wondering like, oh, did they mean it that way? Like, is that really what was going on? You're kind of questioning yourself. And so of course, like those things happen. But I do think that I've also been really privileged to have like a lot of supportive mentors and really supportive friends. And like I said, I've just been really lucky that I haven't experienced a lot of really overt discrimination, but I know that other people do. And I think it's important to talk about that. And I do think that there's some reason for optimism in science. And I think this is, people are becoming much more open to talking about these things and trying to improve. And so I think about that a lot, like how I can be better. And I think that we should think about that in terms of like the scientific system in general, is like how can we make it better? And there's never an end point to that. It's a constant process, and so you kind of just work on it all the time. Talk a little bit more. I mean, I think like the biggest thing, this is really like front and center in my mind because I have a lot of friends who are having kids and thinking about maybe one day having a family myself. Like I think not having affordable, high-quality childcare is a huge issue, and I still see that in my friends and colleagues that that's a limiting factor for them. So I think it's wild to me that we don't have that, and I think that should be maybe like the number one priority in getting more women into science. And then I think going back to what I was saying about kind of appreciating that you can have work-life balance, I think the feeling that I got from talking to friends and colleagues like from graduate school through my postdoc was that if you're not totally focused on science all the time, you can't be successful. And I really don't think, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice to talk about science that way, and we're scaring away people who have a lot of talent and could bring a lot of value to the field. Because they do have kids and their kids are important to them and they want to know that they can actually spend time with their kids, and that's totally okay. And so I think maybe changing this kind of unconscious perception that we have of like, if you're not at the bench all the time, you're not dedicated, you don't deserve to be there. I don't think that's productive. And I think having work-life balance like makes you a better scientist and a better mentor and teacher and person. So I think we should emphasize that more.